El Mencho surrendered to Mexican forces before being killed, journalist claims. Specialized journalist Luis Chaparro cited two sources within the Jalisco cartel who claimed that's how scenes unfolded. Nemesio El Mencho Ceguera Cervantes, the leader of the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, surrendered to Mexican forces before being killed in Tapalpa, according to a specialized journalist. Specialized journalist Luis Chaparro cited two sources within the Jalisco cartel, including a direct secretary of El Mencho, who claimed that's how scenes unfolded after his compound was raided by special forces. In late February, they detailed that the drug lord died at the hands of the Mexican army, unarmed and having surrendered. The account collides with that of the Mexican government. General Ricardo Treviño Trejo said the Mexican forces effectively managed to locate El Mencho after tracking down a lover of his. He went on to detail that military intelligence managed to locate a man close to one of El Mencho's lovers, allowing them to determine his location. Once the person left the premise, officers confirmed that El Mencho stayed there. Forces then moved on to detain him, engaging in a shootout with cartel operatives there. El Mencho tried to escape while leaving a group of operatives behind to slow down government forces. He made it to a nearby wood, but forces pinned him down and wounded him. El Mencho was taken to a helicopter that headed to Mexico City, but he died on the way there. However, the cartel operative disputed the claim. Why do you think the guards didn't fire their RPGs and rocket launchers? One of the operatives told Chaparro. The boss had a rifle. He was the first one to lay it down and surrender. But they ended up killing him, the person added. In another report, the LA Times claimed that El Mencho's detail was not on high alert the day he was captured because the drug lord had hosted a party the night before. You can't be throwing parties when you hiding this shit. No, mom.
No, mommy's wake.
Hey, party. No party. You putting out flyers and shit. The outlet added that he wasn't able to be constantly on the move and avoid law enforcement because he had a late-stage kidney disease. This meant that he needed dialysis on a daily basis, preventing him from having the same kind of movement as other high-profile fugitives. These factors, along with the recent arrests of public officials suspected of having ties with the four letters, helped shape the operation. The official provided leads that helped intelligence officials determine the drug lord's potential location. Shout out Luis Chaparro, but until you could make me understand how you were talking to Mayo's grandson when he got kidnapped and had all of those, respectful quotes from the grandson about how the old man turned himself in out of nobility, and then 24 hours later we find out that ain't the case, and then I don't hear nothing from you about it. Your credibility, and I get it. You're the journalist, bro. You're the guy, you get in there, you sneak through the houses, you talk to the people, that's cool. But he's talking about, a guy told him this, so let's see. So I saw that article, right? I didn't read the whole thing until right now. Didn't give us much. Said, hey, he talked to a guy that talked to a guy that told him about some shit. I went to Instagram. Then I saw this.
El Mencho. It looks like he was getting ready to turn himself in to the Americans. That's right. He was about to make a deal with the DEA in order to save his son, Menchito, go figure, who's doing life in an American prison. Now, according to eyewitness testimony from his pistoleros, his bodyguards, who survived the raid on his compound by the Mexican military, Mencho was unarmed and turning himself in voluntarily to the Marines, and they still shot him dead.
That's not turning yourself in. And making a deal and all that shit. Turning yourself in is, I made a deal, now I'm gonna entregarme to you, I'm gonna turn myself into you, and here you go. If you get run up on, right, and you give up, that's surrendering. There's a difference. If Johnny said it, it's true. There you go. Too much fucking information.
Yeah, too much information and shit.
Now, do I believe, he could have had information that was valuable to somebody? Sure. I also believe that they were so terrified of him because of his reputation that it don't take nothing to just run up in there and say, hey, man, we not taking no chances. Smoke buddy. If there was anybody to worry about in the world, as far as I'm concerned, it would be Mayo. He got 50 years of political dirt.
Clearly, they wanted this motherfucker gone, right? Why wouldn't they extradite him and get big headlines and big press and look at what we're doing for the war on drugs and against kingpins and narco-terrorists? No. He knew too much. God knows what this fool had on half of the politicians in Mexico and the U.S.
Bro, weren't we just screaming this shit about Mayo last year? What are we doing? I thought he had like 3 rings of protection before getting to him. Yeah, he had a moat with dragons, and he had like archers on the fucking wall. Like, we hear a lot of shit. 100 camionetas, 100 trucks.
He was definitely paying everybody off in Mexico, but was he feeding and...
He was paying everybody off? Why? Because you saw ledgers? Yeah, he's paying people off. There's a lot of people in Mexico. They all were.
Trafficking children to American pedophiles?
I don't know how true that story is. Somebody got to show me some shit that makes sense on that. I feel like they threw that together. Again, we saw a fake-ass video with a fake-ass President Bukele, and they were talking about the same shit. I think all of these guys are just out here pushing misinformation, pushing whatever comes out. It's all for clicks. You know, it's all fantastical. None of that shit has to do with what's really going on.
I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know.
But nothing would surprise me at this point. Yo, breaking news about fallen drug lord El Mencho.
Bro.
It looks like he was getting ready to turn himself in to the Americans.
He was getting ready to, or he had guns on him and he surrendered. You said both of them. Which one is it? Was he going to do a deal to get Mencho, or did he surrender right there and put his weapon down and then they smoked him? 22nd of February, the leader of the 4 letters was assassinated during an operation of the Mexican army with intelligence and technology from the CIA of the United States. The operation was launched against El Mencho. It was for his capture. However, he reportedly died during his transfer to Mexico City from the injuries sustained during the confrontation with the Mexican army. The Secretary of National Defense, Trevilla, stated verbatim, the criminal leader died after being wounded in the confrontation and that he passed away between his transfer by air to Mexico City while receiving emergency attention. Sure. It was specified that during the deployment in Jalisco, the military personnel were attacked by members of the criminal group and repelled the aggression in legitimate self-defense. I will say this, the general did repeat that multiple times. They shot first. The Secretary of General detailed that Mencho, along with his other bodyguards, were being transported in a house-type plane where they died. However, the death certificate in the name Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, the real name of El Mencho, details that he died from wounds to the chest and lower extremities. And then an important detail is revealed. The place of death is detailed as Tapalpa, Jalisco, and not in transit or in Mexico City. This is to say that the man was declared dead even before the transfer began. I believe that. I always believed that, though. I just believe he died in transport was a way to clean up their massacre. Why they did the massacre? Maybe he had too much information and was a trafficker of this, that, and the other. Like selling drugs and being as violent as he wasn't enough. Or they smoked him because they was afraid. Pie de Nota has managed to establish communication with 2 sources. One of them being Mencho's direct secretary in Tapalpa. Another one, a hitman in charge of the same in different regions of Jalisco. Both of them survived this whole thing. Well, then you're horrible security if you survived and the operative or the target didn't. From hiding, they both give an account of what happened. And they agree on one thing. El Mencho died in Tapalpa at the hands of members of the Mexican army, having surrendered and been disarmed. The man was taken away dead as soon as they put him on the helicopter. This is according to one of his former secretaries in Tapalpa. The source claims to have worked directly for El Mencho. He was in charge of the region of Zapopan to Puerto Vallarta, including Tapalpa. Well, you failed too. That's your land. You were supposed to, hold him down. Both of y'all failed. The next day, you're on the phone gossiping and shit. Pie de Nota corroborated the source's involvement and closeness to El Mencho through images and by contrasting his story with a second source. You think the boss was going to let himself die knowing what he knew and what he meant in the government, especially with his son locked up? And he said, question the source. My boss talked 1,000 times about surrendering in exchange for having his sentence reduced. The sentence reduced for number two. For those that don't know, number two is El Menchito, his son, currently in prison and sentenced to life. Returning to the operation, a second source who recounts that he was present in one of the cabins in Atapalpa where the operation against Mencho took place corroborates what the first source says. Mencho surrendered and asked to give himself up before being killed. Why do you think his guards didn't fire the RPGs and the grenades? I don't know. Why didn't they? Why didn't they do it even if he did put his hammer down and surrender? I don't understand what that even means. Somebody tell me where I'm wrong. At this point, my boss is surrendering. I think I'm an independent contractor at that point. No, am I wrong? Am I crazy? What are we talking about here? Unless I want to go get a deal too, but who are you? You just gonna be the body next to him on that helicopter. Why do you guys think that the guards didn't fire the RPGs and the grenades? Referring to the missiles and grenade launchers in possession of Mencho's personal guard. Once he felt cornered, we were all gonna surrender. From the moment the government realized that Mencho was there, they started shooting from the helicopter, and us, the gunmen, went out to do our job. The boss, feeling cornered, surrendered because he had very few gunmen with him. And then it reveals the same detail that is repeated in the two stories, or in the two cartel sources who spoke with Pierre de Nota, as well as that of the member of the Mexican army who participated in the operation. El Mencho was carrying an M4, the carbine, officially used by the United States Armed Forces. The boss was carrying an M4. He was first to throw the rifle as a sign of surrender. And they, the army, ended up shooting him down. He just said, from the moment that they knew he was there, they started busting at them with the helicopter. See, what does that mean? What? Pre-boots on the ground mission they was busting out? And what did they shoot? Where did they shoot? What did they hit? I don't know. He was the first one to throw the rifle as a sign of surrender, and the army ended up shooting him down. This is how the source describes it. If what the sources consulted with Pierre de Nota reveal is true, it would explain the violent reaction that set fire to several cities in different states of the country. And Mencho was murdered in cold blood even after he surrendered, something that the four letters perceive as a clear betrayal.
One of the things that stands out to me because, as you said, that Luis Chaparro, he already got what it feels like to break a story with the mini leak and a couple other stories, right? He already knows what it is to be at the spotlight. And I think it's the same thing that him and many other these independent journalists is that they chases those clicks, right? Because it means that you're getting recognized for your work, and it means money as well, right? And I think that this is where they draw the line between being real journalists and then because there's no editor, right? If there's not
Checks and
a
balances.
yeah, by an editor and at a real newspaper, at a real news television network or something like that to cross-reference everything you say or do. Next thing you know, it's you frame it however you want to frame it. And one of the things about this story that stands out to me is that we all know the CJNG does these, video, right? Interviews where they do speeches and,
Right.
call out people. Why didn't they do the same? Why didn't their upper staff get together and say, look, we have a problem with the government because of this and that, because this happened, and showed a bunch of gunmen because if they want to get views or they want to get heard, they would have done it that way, right?
Right.
They probably would have kidnapped a Mexican military official and probably shot him, on live, on video, to show that they were upset because that's what went down. And the fact that nowadays you have a Sicario, supposedly you name a Sicario, somebody who's part of the organization, and you say that he's an important figure, and next thing you know, everyone that knows everything, right? And again, remember, it's command staff, right? Just look at it as a military, right? Whoever was around him, whoever was there at the time, might have some information, but by the time it plays telephone and it gets to the lower leagues, the stories change, right? Next thing you know, he was Superman, and he was taking out people, and he ran out of bullets, so he decided to put his gun down, and he was shot and killed. But one of the things that I do know that kind of contradicts everything I known about him, and me and you spoke about Mencho many times, was that I knew he would die in the gunfight. That he would not, he was not going to see the inside of a prison. And his theory of why didn't they, fire the RPGs and some of the other weapons is the same way. If you look back at the major arrests of really important figures, as of even in the last couple of months, they all had RPGs that were not fired. They all had, grenade launchers that were not fired. You see, even with Chapo back then, you see it in so many different arrests. Just even one of the arrests of El Guano's people, in the same week, I think they got found with like three RPGs, and those were not fired. So their excuses because again, the people that are at the lower level shy want to make sure they glorify these people and make it seem like they're superheroes, you know? And they want to say, well, we were not pussy, you know? Because if not, we would have done this. If not, we would have done that. But of course, if he was injured or he was even shot, I think, everyone knows that the Secretary of State, or what is the Secretary of Security
National
for
security.
Mexico? Yeah, what's the name?
Harfouk.
Harfoot. He said he has it in him. You know, there was a personal thing with him. Mencho and his people tried killing him. You know, in what a few years ago. I believe like in I think it was 2018, 2019, or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, these are same military people that have lost. Soldiers. And that Mencho has threatened, or Mencho actually had took part in killing them. So I believe it was they were not going to let him live, even if he did, right?
Mhm.
Even he did survive some a gun battle like that. But I
Mhm.
think for Luis Chaparro to kind of take it to this extent, I also believe it's like, okay, we're seeing firsthand what mainstream media and social media and the times of, that was last week's information, right? And it's like a week passes and it almost seems like it's been a year because of so much information, and now we
Right.
have to make sure that we benefit from that story, and we start looking for these kinds of theories and conspiracies because it makes for good clicks. And you even seen it with the Johnny Mitchell, right? He considers himself an expert, but yet he throws it out there. I wouldn't know about him and children, right? The way he says is because he wants to have people listen to that part about, I don't know if he's using kids, selling kids for their organs, using people for their organs. I mean, he's the expert. He should say, I never heard of that, right? Yeah, again, these are all clicks. The same way, Katrina said CJNG was kidnapping
Mhm.
pregnant moms and taking the babies and selling them. And this bullshit story of whatever she sells. And they never go back to fix it. They never go back to, she just says, well, it was true. Like, yeah, it was true that some
Well, we
crazy ass
got we,
lady.
we we got from Chaparro during the Mayo shit that he spoke to the grandson and how his grandfather did something so noble by turning himself in, and he never came back that I heard of. If y'all know where that is, let me know where it is. Where he retracted that statement when we found out that the man was kidnapped after all.
So they don't believe in retraction anymore, okay? Because now they're independent, right?
Mm.
Now they would consider themselves not to be, credible journalists. And here's the difference between people like this and Ian Grillo, right? Ian Grillo has an independent, he's an independent journalist who has personal observations as well, right? But he investigates, but he doesn't cross the line between sensationalizing something and trying to, chase the clicks, okay?
Right.
He comes from a perspective where he's lived, where he's one of those journalists that's been there before many of these other journalists, okay? And again, I seen it. There was times where I couldn't explain, like Annabelle Hernandez, who, we became friends, right? She's a good reporter. She has good sources, but she'll get to what the outcome, right? And find out good information, but then she'll put her own spin on it
Mm-hmm.
to prove her point and prove, and to her it's how much she hates the government, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of times it's like, okay, it's for a good cause, and many Mexicans and other people might say it's a good cause, but then it distorts the line between journalists and Johnny Mitchell, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it just drives me crazy, some of the stories that have been circulating on the internet. And again, right, we want to put these people as superheroes. They would have fought. They would have took down 5 military helicopters. And again, could it have been that he was caught off guard? Absolutely, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't prepared.
Right.
That he fought. He tried to run, fight, and he tried to fight a little bit, and said, you know what? We know how many people we have around us,
Mm-hmm.
because he probably didn't trust many other individuals to say where he was at,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew that, absolutely. But after he wasted all his rounds, right? After things didn't go as planned, I could see that
Right.
just from my experience with him. But I never ever. I mean, I would have betted. I wish I would have gone on one of those. What do you call it?
Betting site.
The betting platforms, right? Because I would have known he was never gonna turn himself in alive.
These two guys supposedly were there, right? They supposedly were there. Now, I'll tell you the first thing that struck me, and again, I watched it with y'all. First thing that struck me is even if he did surrender, I would never see them admitting that he threw his weapon down and surrendered. Okay, I could see a scenario where he was unarmed because of the damage that he took, and then he was smoked. But I never imagined that two people would, from his camp that are supposedly that close, that supposedly were there, would go with the story of he surrendered, he gave up.
So remember, and they also say that there was what, eight, I think, or what, nine or 8 to 10
Yeah,
men,
they got
right?
they keep splitting the numbers up. They say 3 or 4 in a helicopter, 8 on the ground. They're never really clear.
No, I think it's eight. I think it would be like eight or something, probably eight, just from my experience.
Eight
Remember, you talked
altogether,
about this.
altogether, including Mencho.
No, I believe that with him and the other guy, if it was true that he was, the top lieutenant,
Mm-hmm.
they could have been probably 10, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I could tell just from the videos I seen from the other cabins
Mm-hmm.
and from the vehicles. Look at the vehicles; they're not going to be, in back of the pickups.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was 3 vehicles at that. And that just tells me, look, in these areas, if you look to see where they were at, that means that he felt real secure. This is something, a place where he probably visited before and stuff like that. And I will tell you, just from how I know how these bosses move, they don't like to tell too many people, right? They don't have a schedule, all right, of where they tell people they're going, and would they will have people in the outskirts where they feel like, okay, we need help here. When you're living in that world, especially for these, big drug lords like, Mile, the Menchos and Chapos, like they don't want to tell too many people, their plans and how they're gonna move around. Okay, I mentioned to you, I mentioned these stories where Maya would move something by himself. He would literally drive a Volkswagen to different places, but I just don't see it like a Sicario or two that were there giving a interview with Luis Chaparro about what happened, and they're not in custody or dead, right? Right now, next thing you know, Katrina's going to show up with someone else, that's going to, say that they're on a helicopter when the military shot them dead. Now, do I believe that could have happened? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they're gangsters just like everyone else. They see the extent that a cartel like Mencho, like the CJNG, are willing to go to kill innocent people, to kill law enforcement and the military, right? And it's like payback. They're not gonna do something to make sure that he even gets a deal or anything like that. I don't ever see a person like that getting a deal, but they're not gonna risk it where someone lets them out later on. The justice system, and they go and kidnap judge's family. Who knows, right? Or the president's family, and they let them walk free. They're not going to chance that. Something like that's more possible in Mexico than anything. They witnessed what happened with Chapo, and I do believe that could have been a thing. But again, once I'm not sure if I'm being biased because me, I'm on American side. It's
Mm-hmm.
like once you shoot at cops, right? Once you shoot at the military, like don't expect to come out alive, right? And I think that the it's like you see the journalists change. We're like, well, what they were too nervous that he wasn't give out information, and you said it. We talked about this, and you said it best. More information than El Mayo,
Right.
who's already in U.S. custody. And I will tell you something. Menchio could have been a little bit more powerful when it comes to his paramilitary, his soldiers, and all that. His alliance that he had in different states with different, regional people.
Mm-hmm.
But he did not have more power in the government and in the corruption side than Mayo. No one did. There's no one else like him. And I will tell you something. I've seen comments, even some of these journalists that they think that Mencho could have been more powerful than a Mayo. And I want to say, look, if Mencho was there, it was because Mayo didn't care about it.
Mm.
He didn't care to battle those wars,
Right.
to have a battle over that. He was confident who he was, and he says in the book, right? He's seen many people come and go, but
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't. It came a time where he was more of like, look, I am who I am. Let's just keep what we have, and he felt confident that no one was going to dethrone him. Right? If you could see, he really didn't have big issues,
Mm-hmm.
with anyone. He's the one that negotiated, the release of Chapo's sons with Mencho and stuff, and he was always playing chess. So, but I think when it comes to corruption and government ties and government context, there was no one stronger than El Mayo.
Yeah, when I first heard that he spoke to survivors, that was my first thought. Who survived? I thought nobody survived.
Yeah, I mean, you could have probably had some people, but again, right? Survivors that supposedly were there and they're giving you a different interpretation, but yet the bosses ain't. In that case, the next person in line would have said, "Let me release this press statement,"
Right.
and tell you what happened,
Right. We would
and
have
they
saw
did
a
it.
hundred dudes in camouflage with big hammers and balaclavas on, talking
Yeah,
crazy.
and I also believe that would have been, they would have been targeting more military officials. To be honest with you, I don't want to give no one ideas, but I hate to even
So
speak
here's
something
the
like this in
question: why
situation.
did they stop? Why didn't they put out one of these messages? Because they're fractured, right? Now, if we say it's because they're fractured at this point and they're trying to figure out, or did one person stop everybody and say, everybody sit the fuck down for a minute?
I mean, that could have been a thing too, but remember, see, what Mentor represented was the face, right? I do believe that when it comes to some of these, different independent groups, I do think that they could have been scared of him. Remember, they're in alliance with him, in alliances, like these people have these, and they claim alliance to Mentor and the CJNG, but once he's gone,
Right. We're back to square one.
it's like, oh shit, he's not around no more. And listen, the next person's gonna have to prove themselves. You hear me?
Mm.
And this is where once you understand the world, and a lot of times it's like, okay, what you have on me. But once you're gone already, then people are gonna take chances. But for the people who are making money or who are benefiting, I want to just suspect that most of the people say, look, everything stays the same. He's gone. And the people that know, like the main group, know who would have been the next person in charge. That's not like it's an easy, understanding. Everyone got the message except for Chapo Sons, right? I say that because, right, at that time, Chapo's right hand man was, Damason, and I know it's everything's like a biased, account of the perspective, but I'm listening to your interview with Luis Chaparro and Mini
Many.
League, and I'm saying, okay, some of the stuff that I wouldn't know are almost like undeniable, and then you see the what happens when people don't like it. I also want to mention, like, you hear this talks about Mencho's wife taking over the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's nonsense. Just from my understanding about even about the case, it was what they try to like convict her at was ridiculous, and the fact that people could think that just because she was married to him, and it's not like they were together. Remember, Mencho's on the run. She did 5 years in prison, I believe, or whatever. It's like the fact that you see all these journalists, like she's the head of the cartel now, she's taking over the business. It's so stupid. It's like, to me, it's like considering that Shy, if something happens to and you were married, your wife would be able to come on and just take over Shy. And I get that because that's all these common things. I ask, people ask me that question about my wife all the time, and it's like, oh, your wife was involved, and yeah, she was running the whole operation behind closed doors. You get me? And here's the thing, like, do I see Val being capable of running the operation? Yeah, because she was involved in that world to begin with to an extent, but the fact that you see all these journalists basically saying, well, she's married to Mencho, so she is Mencho.
Right.
It's like, it's so stupid, bro. It's like, what
Right.
world are we living in? She got caught with some money laundering stuff because she, her, having businesses and taking the money, somewhat like, probably what happened with Val. And now you even see, I seen like thumbnails with Chapo's daughter, like with a military, like CJNG vest. Like, what the fuck? All these clicks and thumbnails, and I told you about it. Like, what if she wasn't? What if Mencho's daughter wasn't wanted anymore because
Mm.
her husband cooperated 100%? Again, today, I don't know. I
But
mean,
here's
just
the
my
thing: who
theory.
did he cooperate with? He cooperated with the United States government. What that got to do with her being wanted in Mexico?
Well, because remember, they share information.
Mm. Too much
They
fucking
share
Too much
information and
information
shit.
and
yeah,
shit.
they share information, and it's like, okay, they get the other picture of it, and it's like, okay, it makes sense. What makes more sense is that today we get news that Eric Valencia, the co-founder, of the CJNG, pleads guilty. Today it makes more sense for me that he was the one giving up all the information and
Mm.
intel, and now he's dead. They're like, shit, I need to cash
Mm.
in on that. I plead guilty. You give me, I need my credit,
Mm.
and everything says that he was cooperating. Another, cartel member cooperating, right? I'll be honest with you. Like, now we have to kind of just make news about someone who's not cooperating, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about that.
Then the cartel series is over. No, we're going with the cooperators for now. Moral of the story is you're not convinced in this Luis Chaparro conversation with two guys that survived this massacre that no one else survived. You're not buying it.
Well, listen, I hear the thing, like Shy, like you know this. We can't argue with that
conversation, that theory that Luis Chaparro might have based on some of those people he had on there. I just don't believe that they're, those people are real. I believe that his analysis is based on bullshit. You get me? And even if it was someone that was there, I still would think that they're too low on any side of the cartel to even speak. You get me? I mean, because we seen them. We see CJNG was one of the first real cartels, like after the Matasetas, which was they were part of, who started doing these videos of propaganda, right? Coming out and pushing out their message. Why wouldn't they push out the same message? Why
Right.
would they be attacking military right now?
Why
It
would they
doesn't
be
make any
calling Luis
sense.
Chaparro?
Why would they be calling Luis Chaparro? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, come on. It's like nowadays, it's like everyone could be involved some way. And just because someone in the organization is just different, right? Remember, sicarios on the field and right hand men are different from the people who die every day, who go and take orders. You get me? So just based on that, my perspective and my knowledge and experience, it's like, it's completely, again, remember, what they're saying to me is bullshit, but what they believe, I can't argue with. You know what
Right.
I'm saying, Shay?
Your gut feeling. You think he was the type of person that was going to be the one to throw his rifle aside and say, "I'm cornered. You got me."
Bro, that's the like joke of all jokes, okay? He showed us, and I'm telling you, this is somebody I knew, this is somebody I spoke to, and I told you since we first started ever talking years ago, okay? He was not going to be a person that was going to get caught alive. All right. They'll keep a bullet in the chamber just in case. You get me? Now, I don't know. He gets hit in a way where he's fighting for his life and he can't fight.
That's something else.
I don't know what me. I don't. I mean, if he's conscious enough, he's saying, kill me, motherfuckers.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
fuck
saying?
you.
You know what? One thing realized that all these big drug lords had in common, no matter what, they always caught the news. Shy. They were
The,
stuck to the news channels, stuck
mm,
to the 5, 6 o'clock news, the 11 o'clock news in Mexico. All of them, newspapers. You know what I'm saying? Heavy on the newspapers, heavy on all the content that they were receiving. They, best believe that there has been a boss if they came across some of these stories that they, ran across your channel. You get me? So there always been, like real
information.
information, And going back to what I was saying about Mencho, they hear all the Chapo stories of how he's suffering. You think he doesn't know how his son is suffering in ADX? And all that fake belief that, he's gonna turn himself in for his son. Give me a fucking break. He
Yeah,
would have
now
done.
that's the other thing. Now let me tell you something. I haven't heard Chaparro say that. I've only heard Johnny Mitchell say that and say that Chaparro said it. Maybe there's something, a piece of this information, a piece of this story that I'm missing. But his story is that he was making a deal with the U.S. to save Menchito.
But listen, it was crazy because Johnny Mitchell's a whole remember. He's a rat hater, right? But he wanted to say that, he was cooperating with the US. He said it about Ryan Wedding too, right? Bro, like you said, cooperating would have been like someone like us or Vicente, right? Having a meeting, someone like me, like having a meeting with the agent and say, hey, I want to turn my son on this discussion.
Right,
It's not like running out of bullets, after you shot
right, right.
and you say, okay, I give up.
And
I
that was
should.
my question. My question is, how are you guys painting this picture? There's a difference between surrender and turning yourself in. Turning yourself in is you made a deal, you've had conversations, you're in there, you turned yourself in. Surrendering is, all right, you're cornered, you're done, they got you dead to rights. That's it.
But it's always like, look, I see a comment right now. All right, here's the thing: people start looking at these people like gods. You get me? Like they cannot make a mistake. You get me?
They're perfect.
They cannot. Just they. It's ridiculous, bro. It's like every big dude. It doesn't matter, and I'm sorry to say this. Like even to my good friend, every big dude that's been in one of those situations that's always on a killer, not killer, whatever. You get comfortable and it's in the least expected place,
Right.
I don't care if you're getting a haircut or you're having a date night. You know
Right,
what I
right.
mean?
Yeah, comfort kills. I said that in season one, episode one of fucking Surviving El Chapo.
Maya went to have a meeting, to him that was an everyday meeting, and look what happened to him. Get caught slipping. You get caught slipping.